Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Lighthouse Canton Insights podcast. This series is brought to you by Lighthouse Canton, a global investment institution that provides wealth and asset management services to accredited investors. Here on this podcast, we'll look to shine a light on the market developments and share strategic insights to help you navigate the global investment landscape. In each episode, we'll be bringing you conversations from leading experts in various fields, including Lighthouse Canton's own investment team and specialists. This podcast was recorded on 18th of July 2024 and was prepared based on the information available as of the date of recording. Please stay tuned for the important information at the end of this episode.
Welcome to this episode of the Lighthouse Canton Insights podcast. The world of finance has always been dynamic, but recent years have seen an unprecedented acceleration of change. The COVID-19 pandemic acted as an initial catalyst, speeding up transformations that were already in motion. However, this was just the beginning of a period of intense global upheaval. World events have sent shockwaves through global markets and supply chains. Central banks worldwide have rapidly shifted gears, raising interest rates at a pace not seen in decades to combat surging inflation. Meanwhile, election seasons in major economies have added another layer of uncertainty, with potential policy shifts hanging in the balance. These events haven't created new trends so much as they've dramatically accelerated existing ones, compressing years of change into months. So today, we speak to Salmaan Jaffery, Chief Business Development Officer for the Dubai International Financial Centre, DIFC, and Prashant Tandon, Managing Director and CEO for UAE at Lighthouse Canton, to examine how these accelerated shifts are reshaping the world of global asset and wealth management. We'll explore how investors are adapting to this new reality and how financial centres like the DIFC are evolving to meet changing needs. Welcome, Salmaan and Prashant. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Samantha, for having me on this podcast. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Samantha. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always good to talk to Prashant.
Great. So today I wanted to just touch on the bigger picture here as we begin. Given that both the DIFC and Lighthouse Canton works with global investors and, the current global financial landscape and how it has evolved in recent years, how do you see global investors adapting their focus?
Samantha, I'll take this first. So obviously, we live in fairly interesting times. The financial landscape globally is becoming extremely challenging and unpredictable. Whether it is the unfortunate situation in Ukraine, Israel, or the economic uncertainty surrounding China, and even the recent few weeks of events, even the political landscape in the US, investors are really, really faced with a very tricky situation, and the landscape to become more and more challenging every passing day. What we've seen as an investor focus over the recent past is clearly the focus is shifting eastward, if I were to look at the western part of the world. And to put it lightly, it's either Mumbai or Dubai. India and the UAE have come out as really, really areas of focus for institutional and family office investors alike. And that's a trend we believe will continue to develop even more strongly. And why not? If you really look at the developed part of the world and any major economy, UAE and India are perhaps the only two economies which are growing in real terms. The real rate of GDP growth in India is at 7%, whereas inflation stands at 5%. And in UAE, the rate of growth is 4% and inflation stands at 2%. As against that, if you look at the US or if you look at any other major economy, the Eurozone, the rate of inflation is higher than the rate of GDP growth. Salmaan, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Prashant. I think we started this conversation with a nice encapsulation of structural factors. And I think from our vantage point, our geography gives us a very interesting perch. I think there are a few things happening. I think one is that we're seeing, as you've suggested, a fundamental shift and movement of both talent and capital. And as Prashant and Samantha mentioned, there are different motivations for this. For some movement of capital and talent, it's because of tax changes or regulatory changes. And of course, let's not forget COVID, which created just a completely new model for how to work and where to work. So one of the examples that we used to see here is that post-COVID, you no longer needed to be necessarily in San Francisco to be doing tech. Or similarly, you didn't have to be in New York or Connecticut to do hedge funds. And in fact, what happened in the US, it was a microcosm for what happened globally. So the tech firms started to hollow out of San Francisco into Texas, and hedge funds started to hollow out from New York and Connecticut into Florida. And that same thing, if you apply the same principle, you start to see that for our part of the world. And certainly we've seen a lot of that. The other thing I'll quickly touch upon is that Prashant talked about the focus changing from east to west. I think demography is still destiny. I think what you see now is the importance of large and young populations driving economic growth. And where economic growth changes, as Prashant knows, so goes financial flows. So just to kind of summarize, we are seeing many of the same changes. I think capital and talent fundamentally is changing. And this region in particular, as Prashant mentioned, UAE and India are very well positioned for it.
And Salmaan, if I might add to what he just said, especially, markets like the DIFC and of course, India, the need for a stable, predictable, and well-regulated financial environment is absolutely a key factor, which we at least are witnessing with our clients. That becomes an important factor when they consider a jurisdiction where they want to operate out of, where they want to call a base. In that respect, I think DIFC really should stand tall as far as the region is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, Prashant, you and I have spoken about this before. I mean, financial services, if you view financial services one way, it's a series of essentially enforceable contracts, right? So you need regulatory and legal certainty. The rule of law has to be understood, has to be transparent, and all the participants need to know that it is applied in that consistent, transparent manner with recourse, right? Because sometimes things don't work out the way they ought to. And so we've had to, we're 20 years old, and that thinking underpins the development of the center as an English common law-based financial center that's always strived to meet and exceed kind of global best practice. And so now when you are essentially vying for top talent and capital from major markets around the world, the proposition has to be, it's a hygiene factor, and there's just no question. We have to operate at a very, very high level, both in terms of legal and regulatory quality and certainty, but you need the protective filters to be able to ensure that esteemed clients, Prashant, such as Lighthouse, right, are happy to put their name in a jurisdiction that stands for quality and that is run the right way. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying that we take compliance and regulatory quality very seriously.
I could not agree more, Salmaan. Thank you.
And Salmaan, so congratulations on that 20th anniversary. And the DIFC is playing a really pivotal role in driving economic growth and innovation in the region. The standards and the regulations that you have talked to in that sense, could you elaborate and share a bit more on what initiatives specifically that the DIFC is undertaking to make it a financial center of choice for ultra-high net worth individuals and accredited investors?
Yeah, sure. Let's take a step back and talk big picture. Going back to Prashant's earlier point, we obviously take the reputation of the center very seriously. And so even though it is my job to bring in as many top people and companies from around the world, I can tell you that we could be 5 times bigger if we wanted to, if we didn't apply very significant screening to the quality of our candidates. And quality, when I say that, I mean not just kind of brand and reputation, but very rigorous screening in terms of being compliant with various global sanctions regimes, ensuring that background checks are done, sources of funds are documented and auditable and known, KYCing every single individual or firm that comes into the center. I mean, all of those things are very well embedded into the DNA of the center. And touch wood, this has given us the privilege of working with quality institutions such as, Lighthouse Canton, right? That's a non-negotiable must-have, and I think we've done really, really well. Some other things I'd say, in addition to that, it cannot come at the expense of customer experience. And so, what we've tried to do is to maintain those standards, but also innovate. So we continue to, develop and modify our company's law to ensure that we have the financial and legal products to be able to meet the needs of our clients. And we can talk about this later, but like the development of world-class trust law, foundations, things like that. And then one last thing I'll say is part of the customer experience is looking at things perhaps as operational as digitizing the onboarding process and ensuring that the touch points can be as seamless and efficient as possible.
That's really interesting to hear, Salmaan. Thanks for that. So we've heard from Prashant as well as you the shifts of focus. At Lighthouse, we are in the Middle East and South Asia and Asia Pacific. We've access to several notable international financial centers such as Singapore and Gift City. And I wanted to hear your thoughts, Salmaan, Prashant, on your perspectives on what trends you're seeing between these regions, these localities, and what also makes the DIFC a compelling choice for investors.
Okay, thank you. It's actually a super question and something that really interesting and varied. You might at first blush assume that we are in some kind of zero-sum competitive battle with respective jurisdictions around the world. And honestly, this is not really the case. And I say that with a great amount, of course, cities want to be able to attract the very best companies and get the largest number of best people. But I feel as though when it comes to economic corridors and regions where there's market access, I think there is great room for working together, right? Prashant talked about the rise of India. So that's a great example, right? India and the UAE have signed a $100 billion trade deal recently. The political and economic and social histories of the two countries are immensely strong. And so our interaction with India, which is this massive market, is based on the principle that we can both simultaneously provide leading Indian firms, whether they're banks or families or advisors or asset managers, with access to the larger region in a manner that benefits the Indian economy as well. And so, to use Gift City as an example, we have a memorandum of understanding that we signed with Gift City actually quite some time ago. We are looking forward to working with them much more closely to find ways that we can help each other mutually. So, for example, it's no secret, it's in the public domain, that Indian capital market story over the next 10, 15, 20 years is going to be an absolute world changer, right? And so we will be interested in finding new ways to create structures that facilitate those flows, those dollar or let's say non-Indian rupee flows into India. That's just one example. Conversely, if we can play a role to help Indian families diversify, their wealth regionally or globally, we will continue to do that. So that's just one example, and I'll pause. I'm eager to hear Prashant's views.
No, Salmaan, it's very interesting that you mentioned those points because they really aligns with Lighthouse. And personally, of course, I think DIFC, UAE in general and DIFC in particular are actually very uniquely positioned. Of course, geographically, you're literally the center of the world. So coverage east, west, very, very convenient. It's very efficient and operationally very, very economical for businesses like ours. So definitely from a time zone perspective, this region is very well favored. On top of that, post-COVID, Salmaan, and you mentioned about that a while earlier, the UAE really stood out in how they supported businesses, on how the businesses just continued to work remotely, the infrastructure, the whole ecosystem just continued to function. And that really put DIFC in particular and UAE in general as an example, not only regionally, but on a global landscape on how things can be executed without compromising health, safety, and well-being. Specifically, what we are seeing from ultra high net worth families and single family offices that we cover, there are increasingly specific requests for helping these families find a base in the UAE and DIFC as a jurisdiction to book their business in. And there are a multitude of reasons, a few we just covered. But if you look at this, the regulatory regime, the stability, political and economic stability, the safety, the infrastructure this place provides, both from a business standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint, is truly unparalleled. Add to that the facilitators or the catalysts that have just been put in place, be it the comprehensive economic participation agreement between UAE and India, be it the concept of Gift City, which is really, to me, going to be a game changer for the next decade or so on how India looks at offshore investments and vice versa. These are all factors which are really going to act as a major catalyst for DIFC. And I think Lighthouse is very well positioned to be able to exploit that opportunity.
Right. Thanks, Prashant and Salmaan, for that. We've talked a lot about both the family offices and the corporate sort of side of things in terms of why the DIFC setting up a great environment and landscape for them. I just wanted to touch a bit more on the personal legacies part of things. I think it was last year the DIFC announced family arrangements regulations as well as the Family Wealth Center, seeing that we are getting more requests. From Lighthouse Canton, we're getting more requests from clients as well, as I'm sure at the DIFC you're getting quite a few family offices and wealth managers looking to set up in the DIFC. What are some of the key challenges in consideration, Prashant, from your end that you're seeing from clients, for example?
Salmaan, that's a very relevant question, actually. See, for any large business or any relevant family office which has global ambitions and footprints, as the families prepare their so-called future leaders, the place of domicile becomes extremely important. From a succession planning point of view, from a legacy planning point of view, from ring fencing of assets, tax considerations, financial considerations, it is an extremely important point of consideration for any meaningful family office. And when it comes to that, people have always, been looking at financial centers like Singapore, Hong Kong, the US, but DIFC has really, really started to feature very prominently in inbound requests that we receive from clients. Whether it is the legal system that the DIFC is offering to its clients, whether it is the structures like foundations and trusts, because please understand, each family has a different and unique set of requirements. I'll give you a small example. When it comes to trusts and foundations, DIFC fortunately provides both regimes. One is a common law construct, the other is a civil law construct. Now, it depends upon what the preference of the family is, what are the unique dynamics and requirements for a family. You can tap onto either. Both are run very equally robustly, both are run very transparently and very well regulated, very efficiently managed. Likewise, about ring fencing of assets, about having foreign ownership, clearly creating distinct ownership structures, the DIFC regime is very, very helpful, very clearly laid out. And I must say that a client coming in to book business in the DIFC, whether he's coming from India, UK, Germany, Singapore, Hong Kong, they really do not feel any difference compared to any top financial center in the world. Add to that the top class infrastructure DIFC has to offer, the experience just becomes outstanding. And at Lighthouse Canton, again, we really, really see this as one of our faster growing regions as far as business and number of clients are concerned. Salmaan, I'm sure you're much closer to the action than I am. Would you want to discuss something about the family arrangement regulations, the Family Wealth Center, which I find very exciting?
Yeah, thanks, Prashant. Let me take a step back and tackle this question from a 30,000 foot level. The reason why we're talking about this is that the backdrop is that, according to UBS, in the next 25 years, something like $83 trillion of wealth, right, is going to go through intergenerational wealth transfer. And this is just essentially post-war demographics, particularly in larger industrial markets. So this is a global phenomenon. It's hitting different markets in different ways. Against that backdrop, and against the specifics of this region where families contribute massive amounts to regional economies in terms of job creation, right? The question of how they manage the businesses that produce their wealth, and then how they manage their wealth from Gen 1 to Gen 2 into Gen 3 is super, super important. Okay, so that's the backdrop. Now, the DIFC has been super committed to the larger project of industrializing, professionalizing this vast amount of private capital, particularly in the region, but not just. Now, that has some other implications, Prashant. As a region, for example, we have traditionally had a reputation for being flush with liquidity, particularly from hydrocarbons, and the sovereign wealth funds here are globally well known as major investors. But we think there's another social phenomenon at play, which is there's something like $5 or $6 trillion of private wealth embedded in families, which is an amount almost as large as the combined sovereign wealth funds here in the region. And 20% of that is going through the same process. And so I think regional economies, and in our case, the DIFC, we have to be prepared to serve the needs of those families. Now, it so happens, because of some of the things that Prashant has mentioned, that phenomenon is not just a GCC phenomenon, but because of this globalization of wealth management and of family wealth, families that are perhaps in India or perhaps in Singapore, or perhaps in Europe, are also diversifying and using the DIFC in Dubai as a place from where to manage their business and wealth. And just to be clear, the beauty of this is not coming at the expense of any one market or the other. It is not that families are picking up everything and moving it from place A to place B. It's simply that our clients are looking just to diversify and to spread the risk a bit more evenly between jurisdictions. So just to summarize, the products and the services that Prashant has mentioned that our clients use for themselves and for their clients have been designed to be seamless, to be recognizable for individuals who have worked around the world in leading jurisdictions. And our objective is to continue to serve their needs.
Thanks, Salmaan. That's really interesting, the whole transfer of wealth and the next generation of wealth and how the different generations see investments. The talk about diversification and spreading risk, I think, I had a very interesting conversation with a colleague who said when he's talking to the younger generation that it's now not really about capital preservation, but more on conservative growth. The older generation still wanting to preserve that capital and look at fixed income products, while the younger generation is focusing on maintaining that balance while still looking for growth opportunities. And maybe we can talk a bit more about the initiatives that the DIFC has been doing at the moment in actively attracting a variety of asset managers to establish them in the DIFC. Maybe if Salmaan, you would want to talk a bit more about what's driving this migration trend and elaborate on the factors driving it.
Sure. What we're seeing now is this unprecedented confluence of a number of factors, right? So we've talked about the wealth that comes out of the ground. We've talked about the wealth embedded in families. Of course, as Prashant has mentioned, we have this massive high net worth individuals. And all of this is coming together at the same time at which the center is now viewed no longer as a new upstart center. We're 20 years old. We have the world's leading managers. And so you put that together. First of all, the Family Wealth Center was designed just to give a bit more formality to that enterprise, which is, since we engage with families around the world, we think it's very important to create that ecosystem where families will find it very useful and powerful to be embedded in an ecosystem where you have top-notch investment opportunities, advisors, financial intermediaries, underlying assets or investment opportunities. And a piece of that is essentially, to have top-notch investment managers to be able to manage money on their behalf. In that area, we've had asset managers for over 20 years, but the last 2 years or so, we've seen an incredible inflow of alts, alternative investment managers and hedge funds. And I think they're being driven, the inflow initially was because of many of the things that Prashant mentioned, which is, post-COVID realignment of capital and talent, the safety and security that Dubai affords, the schooling, lifestyle, housing. But from a financial services perspective, all of that in an environment that's considered to be stable and it works. So they've been coming here in droves. And I think what's really significant, Prashant, I'd love to get your views on this, is one of the things that's changed in this business is it's no longer about client coverage, it's about portfolio management. So the buy side is now interested not just in managing a particular capital relationship, but they're actually putting investment people, portfolio managers here with support and research and coverage. And I think that's a really, really good story. So just to summarize, for me, the asset management and hedge fund story is intrinsically linked with the broader wealth and family story. And now we're going to start to see these pay dividends in the coming years.
Very valid, Salmaan. And you just spoke about this intergenerational wealth transfer. And we are actually witnessing it firsthand in how we are seeing the client engagement model evolve at Lighthouse Canton in a short span of 10 years, right? Earlier, it was more a high-touch, personal, interaction-driven, relationship-driven portfolio management exercise. With the new generation taking over, it's become a lot more impersonal, on-the-go model of engagement. Clients not only need immediate access to information and immediate execution capabilities, but how they're investing and executing is also changed. Samantha spoke about conservative growth, and I couldn't agree more. There is a very, very clear preference for not only investing for growth, but investing responsibly. There is a very clear focus on ESG considerations. There's a very clear focus on investing in living and breathing businesses, what we call active investing rather than passive investing. The new generation of investors is very interested in private markets. Something very interesting that was highlighted to me by one of my teammates is that only about 5 or 6% of global businesses are listed. A significant majority, which is more than 90% of global businesses, are actually held privately. So with this growing interest in investing in private markets, whether it is credit, whether it is private equity, whether it's the startup ecosystem, is also something that we're seeing as a trend. Whether investing in new age businesses or new age asset classes. The whole blockchain crypto as an asset class virtually never existed maybe a couple of years ago, or didn't exist as prolifically as it does now. Now we have clients expressing specific requests to allocate money to these assets. On the other hand, client requirements we see have transcended beyond just managing a portfolio of investments. From the vantage point that Lighthouse Canton sits, client requirements are way beyond managing their portfolios. They include services like succession planning, helping clients in their business and family governance, structuring of the business and family footprint, real estate advisory, philanthropy advisory, and of course, lifestyle management. And that definitely becomes, very, very interesting, yet a very high bar for entry. And that's where, again, we're finding it very interesting, both from Lighthouse Canton standpoint, because we've managed to build capabilities and a significant moat, but also for DIFC, where we are present as a very, very near and dear financial center for us. We see that being very, very proactively followed, where we see several initiatives being taken by the DIFC, which support the whole new age startup ecosystem, the whole tech-savvy nature of the infrastructure here, the way we engage with Salmaan and his team, the way we engage with our regulators is very slick, very new age.
Yeah, Prashant, if I might just add a comment to what you just said. I think your description of how we work together is really a manifestation of how we've changed over the years. We've always been very client-focused. But I think one of the things that we have realized and we're executing on is that our role, if our objective is to add value to our clients, our role has to change. And so if you ask me, before my time here, let's say 10 years ago, the DIFC's role was probably limited to giving you space and offering you a license. And I think since then, the flow of our kind of direction has been to partner and enable much more proactively. Do I think we're in the advisory space? No, not yet. But I think we're heading in the direction of being a lot more consultative and collaborative, because that is what clients demand, right? And so, for example, whether it is working closely with clients such as you, Prashant, to get feedback on how to adjust or tweak our products, or whether it is launching our partner program, which is a channel partner program, whether it is going to market together with our clients in jurisdictions where it's mutually beneficial, or whether it is organizing events where, clients are able to enhance or grow their business. I mean, you've hit it on the head. This is something which I think will continue. And just going back to your earlier comment on the Family Wealth Center, this is another example of trying to create the specific economic and social conditions for the ecosystem to come together. You mentioned the Innovation Hub. The Innovation Hub we started 6 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago. And we have over 1,000 companies. And it's remarkable because when it works well, people say that ideas are circulated, technologies are developed, the investors are walking around. So we want to continue that kind of collaboration in all the sectors that we operate in.
Thanks, Salmaan. I think as we're coming to the end of our conversation, I wanted to wrap things up and focus on two key themes we've been seeing in this conversation: innovation and talent. So, Prashant and Salmaan, how do you feel the DIFC has positioned itself as a leading global financial hub? And what innovations and initiatives have contributed to this rapid growth and attractiveness to international businesses and talent?
There's something I would like to cover, when we spoke about talent and innovation, something that really is relevant for our business here. Given our experience with, different international financial centers, I've found as a business owner now over the last few years, attracting and retaining talent in the DIFC is far more easy and far more efficient for us. Whether it is the ease of getting business visas, whether it is giving eligible employees a golden visa to work and live in the UAE, whether it is allowing foreign businesses to own 100% stake in a business in the DIFC, to small things, but very meaningful, in my opinion, is the alignment of the working week to a Monday to Friday working week. Things happened so fast and in such a meaningful and efficient manner, it's hard to believe. I often tell my clients and my business partners this: what the UAE and DIFC did during COVID was implement decades worth of reforms in maybe months. And that's something which, Salmaan said about speed of execution. That's something that's really, really commendable, and how it impacts our business in a tangible manner. And I'll just address 2 points here, is that moving from a Sunday to Thursday working week to a Monday to Friday working week just added one extra working day to our lives here in the UAE. And that's 20% efficiency. Likewise, the ease of attracting talent to this center is just unparalleled, because getting work visas for eligible employees is far more seamless and efficient than most financial centers in the world. Those are the 2 points I'd like to add, from my side.
Salmaan, do you have anything to add to that?
I would simply say that the requirements of being a global financial center are that we have to behave in a manner that befits global clients. And so if there's one thing that we've tried to do is to keep up with our considerably talented client base. And I think when you're client-centric and you listen to your clients, inevitably know more than you they have domain expertise. And so when we are successful, it is when we are listening very closely to the feedback that we get from clients. Clients are not here for the sun and the beach and the great schooling, right? They're here to create value and to be financially successful. And we take that responsibility very seriously. I think that's a cultural attribute that we have that we are very proud of, and we will continue to listen very closely to our clients. One other data point for you, and I think it's worth mentioning that to echo Prashant's observations. I mean, it is no surprise that the DIFC has doubled in size in 3 years. 3.5 years ago, we were 19,000 people, and we're over 42,000. The actual numbers we will reveal in our mid-year results next week. But that's quite remarkable. This is a doubling of really high caliber individuals from around the world who are at the top of their games in financial services, in technology, in law, in advisory, in consulting, right? And that only happens when the platform is demonstrably sound and people are being successful here, right? I completely appreciate Prashant's point there.
Thanks, Salmaan and Prashant, for your insights. That's been really fascinating to hear about how the DIFC has been evolving and how it has become hub for the families and businesses in the region. Wanted to thank you both for sharing your insights and perspectives, all of the innovation and talent initiatives as well. It's clear that we're living in a time of rapid and unprecedented change, and the Middle East is poised to embrace and benefit from these opportunities. With all the change and development that the DIFC has done over the years, I'm really excited to see how it will continue to play out in this dynamic and evolving ecosystem. Thank you both, Salmaan and Prashant.
Thank you, Samantha, for having me on the podcast. Salmaan, it's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you, as always, Prashant.
Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more episodes of the Lighthouse Canton Insights podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lighthouse Canton Insights podcast. We hope you have found these conversations insightful. To hear more conversations from more experts, please do subscribe to the Lighthouse Canton's Insights podcast. You can also stay up to date with Lighthouse Canton's latest news and insights by visiting our website at www.lighthouse-canton.com or social media pages. We look forward to having you again in the next episode. This podcast has been prepared by Lighthouse Canton Private Limited and or its affiliates for informational purposes only. There is nothing contained in this podcast that constitutes advisory services. This podcast shall in no event constitute or be considered as advice to invest in any specific investment or investment class, vehicle, or in financial instrument. The information contained in this podcast shall not be considered as legal, tax, financial, or other advice. You should consult a professional to obtain specific advice regarding financial, legal, regulatory, tax, and other regulations applicable to you. You should consult a financial advisor authorized in your jurisdiction before making any investment decision to ensure that you fully understand the products and potential risks involved. Please visit www.lighthouse-canton.com/podcast for more details.